In 1890, Winston had become as modern as anyone could imagine for the time. Think the Gilded Age. Electricity, street lights, paved streets, the railroad, telephones, and streetcars. An era of prosperity. A group of wealthy citizens in Winston decided to turn a part of downtown into a place called West End. It would be a mighty fine resort community with a lavish, fancy hotel on 4th Street. Wealthy people from all over the world would come to stay. One of the planners was Tobacco King R.J. Reynolds, a wealthy and progressive businessman whose family played a big part in developing Winston. Reynolds believed a fancy hotel would bring notoriety to Winston and boost the economy, and they named the hotel after Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf, the leader of the Moravian colonists who had originally laid out the town of Salem. Hotel Zinzendorf's opened in 1891. It stood 4 stories high, and it looked like a castle. It was elegant, and there was beautiful views, and in the evening, a 2-piece orchestra in the ballroom. On Thanksgiving Day, 1892, the Hotel Zinzendorf's chefs rose early to fix the hotel's Thanksgiving Day dinner. Reynolds and several others went into the woods to shoot wild turkeys and quail for the staff to cook. Around 11 a.m., there was a fire. Flames shot out from behind the elegant hotel, and people ran for the doors. Because of its wooden frame and shingles, the Hotel Zinzendorf stood no chance against the fire. No one was seriously hurt, but by 1 o'clock that afternoon, the hotel was gone. The exact cause of the fire was never determined. An insurance covered part of the loss, but no plans were made to rebuild the Hotel Zinzendorf. And one reason, in 1893, the United States entered a serious economic depression. The Gilded Age was gone forever. My source for this information came from the Encyclopedia's article on the Zinzendorf Hotel.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes. So guess what?
What?
I finally got jury duty.
What? Okay, I am jealous.
After years of being home,
Yeah.
I have a job, and now I need to be at work, and I have jury duty, but I have wanted it for so long.
But I'm still so bummed out. I want jury duty. Why can't I get jury duty?
Oh, I know.
I
I'm
guess
so
I need to go
excited.
get a job, and then I'll get called up. Okay, I'm gonna try not to begrudge you your happiness with that. You'll have to update us. But if they choose you, like you have to go through that elimination process, but you'll probably get chosen.
Ooh, I hope so. I won't tell them about the podcast.
Oh yeah, because
Depending on what it is, they might not let me do it.
Right. So I hope you get chosen, because then that'll give me hope. If I ever do get called, I'll get chosen.
That is so exciting.
Yeah. We're not drinking anything because we are recording in the evening and we don't want to be up all night. But we're going to give a shout out to supporters of our show. Even though we didn't have coffee provided, we had lunch with Ricky Allred today.
Yes. It was so fun.
Yes, it was. He's always been a supporter of our show. We met him at CJ's, and he bought our lunch, which was so nice.
It was breakfast for lunch. It was delicious.
Yes. So thank you, Ricky, for supporting us and being such a good friend to our show.
Yes, it was fun hanging out with you.
Always fun hanging out with Ricky.
I had a whole episode almost done, and then I changed gears.
Yeah.
So this story actually happened in Winston-Salem.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Local. I love it when you do local ones.
On February 8th of 1894, approximately 6,000 people would meet up at the gallows on Liberty Street in Winston-Salem. Across from where the Smith Reynolds Airport is, it would be the last public hanging in Forsyth County.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah. So Peter DeGraff was born sometime around 1870 in Elizabeth City. Do you remember us talking about Elizabeth City?
When we did Nail Cropsey.
Yep, that's right. His father, Anthony, had been born and raised in France. Soon after immigrating to the U.S., he met and married Peter's mother, Ellen, and then the family moved to Winston-Salem from Elizabeth City in around 1876. So Peter, he was like a smaller guy, just a smaller stature. He had light brown hair and blue eyes. He kept this wispy mustache, and he had this prominent nose, like that Roman profile.
Mm-hmm.
While his mother and sister took care of the house and their younger brother, Peter, his older brother, Joseph, and his father, Anthony, would go out and take, like day labor jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is all before 16 years old. But Peter wasn't super interested in work. I mean, he did it, but it wasn't like what he was waking up every day to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
By the time he was 16, he had already had a pretty rough reputation. He'd done some time for theft. He'd been arrested for carrying a gun inside city limits. He was fined $10 for that.
Oh, $10 whole dollars.
10 whole bucks, but he couldn't pay it.
Oh.
And so he had to go to jail.
Oh, okay.
And he spent 2 months there and would have spent longer, but he dug a hole through the floor of his cell and lowered himself down with 2 bed sheets and escaped.
The what's the word?
Ingenuity
of some of these people always just kind of surprises me, but okay.
Yeah. They never went back after him, I guess, or didn't find him. So Peter was quite the ladies' man. But as you know, and can probably imagine, the relationships he had never worked out very well for the ladies. It makes you wonder how he was able to seduce women with a reputation like his. But, from what I read, he did have this tender way with women in the beginning.
He was probably a smooth talker.
I'm sure. And if they had ever heard him speak to his mom, their hearts probably melted because supposedly he genuinely adored his mother and just doted on her. In January of 1890, Peter would meet a young girl named Ellen Smith. Her name was actually Mary Ellen, but they called her Ellen. She was working in Winston Salem as a domestic servant for the Rose household. Ellen Smith was born in a town called Forbrush. Do you know where that's at?
No.
That's in Yadkin County. She was born to a young woman named Julie. Julie they called her a mulatto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what that is.
And I'm thinking that's anything really that wasn't white, right? I know it's probably mixed because it's like they're not white.
Right. I think
but they're not fully black.
Right. It was a fair-skinned black person.
Okay. I didn't know if that included Native Americans or...
I don't think so. I think it was just a fair-skinned black person.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Melungeon?
No.
I'm pretty sure my mom's family is Melungeon.
Really?
And it's similar to that. It's a mixed race of people that are in the Appalachian Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably have Black, African, and Spaniard in them, but they migrated over to the Appalachian Mountains, and they all have some of these features. Anyway, long story short. But one of their distinguishing features is this bump on the back of their head. It's called the Appalachian knot, and my mom and her brother both have it.
Really?
Yeah, my sister's been doing the family tree. We've been doing some research on it.
That is so
It's
cool.
been crazy.
Yeah, so her father was white. His name was Julius, and her mother was mixed race.
Okay.
They called it mulatto back then. Her mother would have been about 22 when she had her. And I do know that Ellen was born into poverty. Mm-hmm. She lived with her mother, her grandmother, aunts and uncles, and sometimes her dad. They were poor, it seems like, but they accepted her because, they let her mom come there and have her. They didn't send her mother away, mm-hmm. and they kept her there until she was around 13 years old. And then it was time for her to support herself. Oh. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Gosh. So Ellen would travel alone to Winston-Salem, where she went to work at the Rose household. Kenny Rose worked at D.D. Shoulder's racket store in Winston-Salem, and that was on 3rd Street. He was a clerk there, and that was a prominent store in Winston-Salem at the time. The Roses were a respectable family. They would later say that she cooked really good, but that she wasn't very bright. And I'm thinking, well, she was 13 years old taking care of your entire family, so... I'm sure mistakes were made.
Right, exactly.
13.
Yeah. If she's taking care of herself, she's pretty smart somehow.
Right, exactly. It's really sad because if you think about it, Ellen, she was alone in a place with no friends, no family. And I'm sure because of her race, like I said, and social class, she didn't have people lining up to hang out with her. It's no wonder why she would have been susceptible to somebody like Peter DeGraff. A newspaper from the day said that he abused her virtue. They got to know each other. They were spending these summer nights together after work. Peter, in the beginning, was a perfect gentleman, taking her on dates, going on walks, talking to her for hours. And eventually, he even promised her that they were going to be married. And of course, that's how we're going to be married anyway, that whole thing.
Made those promises, yeah.
Yes. Eventually, the two would end up meeting regularly in the woods behind the Zinzendorf Hotel. By 1891, Ellen was pregnant. And Peter's attitude very quickly grew cold towards her, as you can imagine. He was distant and it broke her heart, but he still talked to her like he didn't completely throw her away. And we don't exactly know what happened, but we know that in December, she told her boss, Mr. Rose, that somebody else had hired her and that she was going to go work for them. But in actuality, she went home to Yadkin County where she gave birth to her baby. The baby was either stillborn or died right after it was born.
Oh.
I'm not sure what the sex was because there's really no record of this baby's birth. After she had the baby, she traveled back again to Winston-Salem and resumed her job at the Rose families as their housekeeper. She was about 17 by this time. Peter now was working at the Zinzendorf Hotel in Winston, which was actually right across the street from where she worked. And actually, you know how things get kind of twisted? I have read several accounts that say she also worked there and that she just lived at the Roses. Like she was boarding there.
Yeah.
And so that's a possibility. If she did work at the hotel, that would explain how she was able to meet him and spend a lot of time with him, Peter was around 22 at this time, and apparently when she got back to town, he decided he loved her again. And apparently they picked right up, where they left off too. Peter and Ellen were seen all over town together in Winston. The two were usually arguing though. A store owner would later testify that Peter had brought Ellen into a store and introduced her as his fiancée. He told the store owner to allow Helen to get whatever she wanted and he would pay for it. And he did come in and pay the tab every month. Every now and then she would come in and get some candy or a drink or just something little like that. So she wasn't like taking advantage of him. In 1892, Ellen found herself pregnant again.
I was kind of waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. And this time Peter told her he's not the father of the baby. We know how that goes.
Wait, he told her?
Yeah, he's like, I'm not the father of the baby, and I don't ever want to see you again. And he went to the store and told the clerk that he and Ellen were not engaged anymore and not to allow her to get anything. What a jerk.
What a jerk.
Ellen was devastated at the way he was treating her, and she tried to reason with him. Not that she followed him around, but she just tried to get him to talk to her, which you can imagine you would do if you're pregnant with somebody's baby.
Sure.
He actually told her that if she didn't leave him alone, he was going to shoot her.
Oh.
Yeah. Ellen was so tore up about this that she couldn't work for a couple of days. She was just literally physically sick over it. On Tuesday, July 19th in 1892, after she fixed lunch for the Rose family, Ellen still had on her little white apron over her blue dress, and she went to a nearby store where she bought a yellow silk scarf. She was later seen near a spring by the Zinzendorf Hotel. A witness saw Ellen at about 3 p.m. laid back near the spring with a young man. His head was in her lap, and her arms were wrapped around him. On that next morning, on the 20th, Hattie Pratt, a laundry worker at the Zinzendorf Hotel, came across a dead girl's body in the woods nearby. And how she found out about it was because a man had approached her and told her, "Hey, I found the body of a girl. Can you come out there with me and, and let's see what's going on?" And so she agreed, and she went out there with him and, of course, sounded the alarm.
And was that guy that did that Peter? Or
Yes.
she just didn't know who he was?
She didn't know who he was.
But it was Peter.
Mm-hmm. Forsyth County Sheriff and Coroner were brought to the scene where they found Ellen Smith's body laid back on some brush. She had been shot through the heart. Her blue dress was blood-stained and had gunpowder on it. They found her white apron hanging from a branch of a tree, and it also was stained with blood and gunpowder. There was no evidence of a struggle. In her pocket, they found a piece of paper, and it was a note begging her to meet up. It was signed by none other than Peter DeGraff. The coroner's jury wasted no time. Her body was carried by hand by several men to the police station at the Winston Town Hall. Now, and that's over by where the Reynolds building sits today. Mm-hmm. The bad thing about that is that they took her, kind of paraded her through town half naked.
Oh.
Just no dignity.
That's what I was going to say. They didn't even let her keep her dignity.
No.
That's so unfortunate.
Really sad. The next morning, Thursday, July 21st, 1892, the county medical examiner did a post-mortem on the table in the town hall in full view of gawkers. Yeah.
Was that common practice, or they just...
I don't think so. I mean, it's just unbelievable
That's
that they
just
would do
uncalled
that.
for.
Yeah. He reported that Ellen's body was already swollen and had been eaten by insects. He also said that the bullet had severed a large artery near her heart, and his conclusion matched the coroner's jury. So they issued a warrant for Peter DeGraff's arrest. Ellen's best clothes were sent for at the Rose's house. And people thought that Ellen was an orphan because she lived alone in the city. And so her body was put in a wooden coffin and taken to the nearby poorhouse on North Liberty Street near the Smith Reynolds Airport. And she was buried. Nobody bothered to inform her family.
Wow. That's cruel.
It is. Yeah, nobody reached out to them.
Wow.
No. So law enforcement, they were looking for Peter DeGraff, but they couldn't find him. Articles were being printed against the sheriff, claiming that Peter was just walking around as he pleased after the murder. The sheriff wasn't trying to arrest him, that he was either afraid or unwilling to arrest him. But the sheriff had actually offered $25 like a reward of his own money. So that just wasn't true. You know how newspapers were.
Yeah.
Another article came and said that Peter should be lynched. And then there were others. The Western Sentinel in Winston was, this made me so mad. They were kind of in favor of Peter DeGraff, and that, I don't know, it was just sad.
Blaming her for
definitely victim shaming.
Yeah.
But then Ellen's family in Yadkin County found out what had happened. Ellen's aunt, Rosa Smith, came to Winston, and she started really complaining about how Ellen's body had been marched through town and put on display naked during her post-mortem, and just, not giving her any dignity. The Western Sentinel then switched to Ellen's side. Rosa settled in. She stayed at the Terry House on Main Street next door to the Hotel Jones, and she just started really advocating for her niece. What actually happened was, after he came out of the woods, the 20th, which was the day after the murder, and then that warrant was issued the next day on the 21st. Well, he just kind of kept his head down for a couple of days. And then he went down to the railroad and took a train to Mount Airy, which was about 35 miles from Winston. The train passed within just a few feet of Ellen's grave. For the next few months, he worked at Mr. Yoakley's sawmill. He lived under the alias H.D. Hendricks. But then one day, out of the clear blue sky, he decided to take a train home.
He must have thought he was in the clear.
I'm sure. And that was in June or July of 1893. Okay. Peter went out to Ellen and hollered out to her, "If you're in heaven, come back to me. But if you're in hell, then stay where you are." Yes.
That's weird.
Later, whenever he was caught, they asked him, like, "Why did you do that?" And he said that he had read somewhere that if the murderer, so he's not too bright because he's literally telling on himself, that if the murderer were to say to the person that they killed, that they would arise. He was recognized and, people got a hold of the police. He went to a friend's home and they found him hiding under a feather tick. And the police officer said, "Old man, get up. We've got you." So they, took out their pistols and threw back the mattress. And of course, "All right." He said, "All right, I'll give up. I want you to treat me like a gentleman though." And they're like, "We're not going to hurt you if you act right." And I guess he acted right because they rode back and they didn't even shackle him. They just put him on a horse beside Adams and took him to jail.
Okay.
The first week of August, the Forsyth County grand jury indicted Peter for Ellen's murder. So during the time that he was held, both before and after his trial, he was like, "I'm not guilty. I did not do this." Over the next several months, he wrote these letters to editors of the Sentinel. In one, he said, "When I am gone, you will someday find the man who committed the crime."
Don't they always do that?
Yes.
Now I know why they always say everybody in prison is innocent.
Yes.
Because they all do claim that, don't they?
All of them. His trial began on August 11th in 1893. The courthouse was packed with spectators, and they were all male because women couldn't bear such a spectacle.
Oh, those poor women.
I know.
So weak.
But Ellen's aunt, she was seated in the front row the whole time, and she was not moving.
Good for her.
The most damning piece of evidence against him was, of course, that note found in Ellen's apron. "Dear Miss Ellen, I write this to you to see if you are mad with me. If you are, let me know. Please don't thin-heart of me, for I have loved you all my life and can't let nobody but you. So please let me prove your love. So I want you to come tomorrow to the spring. If you will, please come and don't fail, for I want you to come. Goodbye, love. Want to kiss for you, as you have done before." The trial went on for about 3 days. 42 witnesses testified. It took the jury 8 hours to reach a decision.
Wait, how many witnesses?
42.
Wow, that's a lot.
In 3 days.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot. And they said that's not counting the ones that they would have come back up. And
Yeah, wow.
yeah. This was the verdict. The jurors for the state, upon oath, present that Peter DeGraff, late of the county of Forsyth, with force and arms of, and in said county on the 20th day of June, 1892, committed this malice aforethought unlawfully, willfully and feloniously did kill and murder Ellen Smith, contrary to the form of the statutes in such case made and provided, and against the peace and dignity of the state. He was found guilty. Judge Winston sentenced Peter to be hanged for the murder of Ellen Smith. He was sentenced to be hanged on Saturday, October the 21st, but he appealed. The state Supreme Court denied it, though. And then a new trial date was set for February 8th in 1894. Peter, of course, this whole time continuing to deny that he'd killed Ellen. He swore that he loved her, that he could have never done this to her, that he wanted to marry her.
And yet, through 2 pregnancies, he still had not married her.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so by this time, most jurisdictions, is that right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They didn't allow public executions anymore. Public executions had been done away with. But they decided that Peter's execution was going to be public because they wanted to make an example of him.
I think the people wanted to see that justice too.
Peter developed these sleeping problems, and he actually got addicted to sleeping powders. So on the night of February 7th, the day before his hanging, he took his sleeping powders. He woke up on the day of his execution and he ate a small breakfast. He put on his new black suit that Forsyth County had so graciously bought for him. And then he shook the hands of the jailer, Ziegler, and their children. And it said that he teared up when he did because he had kind of become close with them. I mean, he'd spent quite a bit of time there. And he gave one of the kids an apple that was left over from his last meal. A group of local young Christian men would meet and they would come to the jail like really frequently and pray with him. They came that day, and so did just about every preacher in town. They really hoped that Peter was going to confess for his own soul's sake. But no such luck. Yeah. Peter chose the Missionary Baptist Church, and he asked them to baptize him. But the Reverend H.A. Brown, he was like, that's not necessary for salvation. He didn't want to be associated with it. And like I said, there were 6,000 people gathered there that day. Many of them with their picnic lunches.
That's always
you know how
amazing.
They did selling food, selling postcard. It's just crazy to me. It's like a carnival,
right? It's always surprises me that like people show up with all of that stuff ready to.
Yeah,
but is it any different than us going to the movies to watch?
I know.
You get your popcorn and you go watch or listen to a true crime podcast. I don't know. Maybe I'm the pot calling the kettle black.
We'll be back after a quick break.
At the beginning of this year, one of my New Year's resolutions was to get my home decluttered and organized, especially my kitchen. Just going in there felt daunting. Even family meals were no longer enjoyable. I knew that I needed help because the thought of tackling it on my own was overwhelming. And then Melody told me about Shannon over at Functional Spaces. And let me tell you that meeting her transformed my kitchen from a cluttered mess to a cozy functional space that I once again can take pleasure in.
Everyone has that one chaotic area in their home that requires excessive time and energy to manage. Many of us can identify more than one. For Darlene, that was just inside her kitchen door.
Yes, everybody would come in and throw mail, keys, and coats all over the counters and chairs. I told Shannon this was such a source of stress for me. Why couldn't everybody just put their stuff away? And she explained that we could easily turn that area into a place of peace and productivity, a true functional space. We added a coat rack with key hooks and a small mail bin, and that has been a game changer. That's just one example of the difference she made.
Functional Spaces is based in the Triangle and serves Central North Carolina. If you're ready to experience that same transformation, go to functionalspacesnc.com and fill out the contact form. You will receive a link to schedule your discovery call to chat about your project area. Again, that's functionalspacesnc.com. Tell her your friends at Hard Times and True Crime sent you.
I know. I always think about that. And I think about how probably little entertainment they had.
Mm-hmm.
And so they probably made entertainment out of just about anything that they could.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
He shook hands with his brothers and handed them his hat and his Bible that he was carrying. I actually saw a picture of that Bible, by the way. Peter's father, he just couldn't do it. He couldn't watch his son die. Peter's mother is not mentioned, and I'm sure if the father couldn't, she couldn't either, because she was very close to him.
Yeah, you said at the beginning that he loved his mama.
He loved his mama, yes. And then the sheriff read the death warrant and asked Peter if he had anything to say before, the sentence was carried out. And he said no. The Reverend Brown read the 51st Psalm. He prayed and led the crowd in Am I a Soldier of the Cross? And Peter joined in singing. But then finally Peter said, I have something to say. My hands have been stained in blood. I have kept it back. God told me to. Yes, I shot that woman. He said he was drunk and that he and Ellen argued. She had been following him around and he shot her. He said that her last words were, Lord, have mercy upon me. He said that he took off her apron and laid her out on the ground, and that when her body hadn't been discovered by the next day, he felt guilty, and that he went back to be sure that it was quickly found. And that's when he told the woman. Then he walked to the front of the stage and looked down where all the boys were, down there. They were kind of up against the rope. And he said, "Young men, don't drink liquor, don't gamble, don't go with fast women, because if you do, they will do to you what they are about to do to me." Peter then shook hands with everybody that was, there on the gallows. A black hood was placed over his head and the rope was tied around his neck. And then he asked if he could shake hands again with the sheriff. Peter looked up and said, "I'll see that bright sun there, but a few moments longer." And those were his last words. His body twitched twice, and then 7 minutes later, he was pronounced dead. He was cut down, placed in the coffin, and buried just a few yards away from Ellen Smith in the potter's field. Today, the graves are buried under concrete, unfortunately, because it's beneath the Forsyth County maintenance facility.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the story of poor Ellen Smith.
Wow. That was really sad.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to back up and say something. We were talking about the entertainment
Yes.
values. I just wanted to clarify that when we tell these stories on here, it is not simply for entertainment.
No.
Like, we're not just, I think there's a lot to be learned from true crime stories.
I do too.
There's a lot of red flag warnings. There's a lot of things that can help us learn to take care of ourselves better, learn how to spot dangerous situations, these psychology type things. I think there's a lot to be learned from it, and it's not specifically for entertainment value.
Right.
And there's always a biblical lesson usually in there, or not biblical, but there's always a moral lesson that can be learned from it too. So I just wanted to kind of clarify what I was saying before. But anyway.
So I don't know if you know it or not, but Poor Ellen Smith is like a super popular murder ballad.
No.
So Gillian Welch recorded it. Ralph Stanley. I mean, it's been recorded over and over and over again. Well, I found this recording of it on Bandcamp. This band, they're called the Swamp Lilies. And I really like them. They're a band out of New Orleans. Obviously, we can't just put songs on here we like because of copyright issues. And so I emailed them. And they got back to me, and they were so sweet. I told him, I said, if you'll let me use your song, I'll tell anything about y'all that you want me to say. And he said, well, you can tell him that the Swamp Lilies are from New Orleans, Louisiana. He was really excited, that we were going to be using the song. He said that it would be nice if we would mention the person singing and playing the fiddle on that song, which is Al Tharp. He was a Grammy award-winning musician, and he learned that song and many others at the feet of Tommy Jarrell himself. When Al was in his 20s, he lived with a bunch of younger musicians who were interested in old-time music in West Virginia. So they called Tommy whenever they wanted to come and played music with them. They'd just show up with a bottle of their favorite liquor, get drunk, and play music all weekend long.
Music.
He said one time he asked Tommy if the guy in the song had really killed Ellen Smith. And he said, yeah, he killed her. He killed her. He wrote, killed her. Got her big, burnt her up in a brush fire. Got her big meant he got her pregnant. And he actually did, I found out later, burn her body.
Oh.
Yes. He tells the story really well, and he said, if you're ever interested, I can get you an interview with him.
Well, that's interesting.
He was the sweetest guy. His name is Nathan, by the way, from the Swamp Lilies.
Well, thank you, Nathan.
Yes, and so I'm really excited about y'all hearing their song.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Those were some hard times.
Yes, they were.
Tears when people all said that Peter DeGraff had shot Ellen Smith dead. It's poor Ellen Smith. How was loved her too dearly to take her sweet life. They grabbed a Winchester, they hunted me down, but I was away on Mount Airy Town. It's poor Ellisville, how was she found? Shot through the hard line, cold on the ground. They carried me to Winston, my trial to stand, to live or to die as the law may command. MacArthur will hang me, he will if he can. God knows if they hang me, I'll die an innocent man. It's poor Ellisville, how was she found? Shot through the hard line, cold on the ground.
I work and live about 30 minutes east of Winston, and personally I'd say that a good structure fire would do most of the city a favor. But there's a little corner of the east side of Winston that my wife just absolutely loves. It's called Old Salem. It's a historic Moravian community that's been preserved from a long time ago. And you can go and visit Old Salem in the spring or the fall, but for whatever reason, my wife likes to go in the middle of July when it's 95 degrees outside. And we go back and look at the same houses on the same roads and get the same stories year after year after year. But it's a historically proven fact that hard times and true crimes gives you a new story every time. So you make sure you tell everybody you know, even if they're from Winston-Salem, to check us out. Till next time, goodbye.